get out the way.
All right, we'll switch live. And that we're going in 3 seconds. Fast, 2, 1, and you're on.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Police Chief Review Committee meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Leslie, do we have a quorum? Yes. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the October 26th meeting. So moved by Ms. Victoria, seconded by Ms. Caldwell. At this time, we will begin with our candidate interviews. First up is candidate Darren Ahmed.
Good evening, everybody. How are you all today?
Thank you for coming, Mr. Ahmed. The way the interview process is going to...
Hey, brother. Good. How are you all?
All right, good to see you.
Ma'am, great to see you.
Doing well.
Right.
Mr. Ahmed, the way the interview process is going to work, you're going to have 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and then each committee member will have the option of asking up to 2 questions. Up to 2 questions. We don't have to ask 2, but we have an opportunity to ask up to 2 questions. There is a list of topics that we will be asking the questions from, and then each committee member will state the topic that the question is coming from, ask the question, and then you'll be given 2 minutes to answer each question. After all of the questions have been asked, you'll be given 2 minutes to make closing remarks.
Yes, sir.
All right. With that being said, if everyone is ready to go, you can begin with your opening statement.
Again, good evening. I'm Sergeant Darren Ahmed. Tell y'all a little bit about myself. I've been with the Baton Rouge Police Department for approximately 20 years now, a little bit more. I'm not originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm native to New Orleans, but I've lived in about 13 different places and went to 13 different schools. So this place, up until this day, is the first place I've ever been able to call home, an actual home. I've been here 24 years following my graduation from Southern University, which is why I initially came here. I don't think I ever thought law enforcement would take me this far in my career, but my mother always said, if you want to make the good Lord laugh, you tell him your plans. So I stand before you all today, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here to present to you all. Leadership is, I believe, called upon, and I never had the initiative to want to be the chief of police this early in my career. So it definitely was a calling, and I will do my best and live up to my level of integrity and the city's level of integrity in a leadership role that I've applied for today. And hopefully I will please you all today with the answers that I can provide you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. We'll begin with the interview questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us, Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Whether you're selected for chief or not, what would you want your legacy to be when you retire from the Baton Rouge Police Department?
I'm all about the people, Mr. Green. I look at my legacy as being, what did I do in a positive manner to express myself to the city in a way that I led the city. It's in my knowledge and in my belief that as the chief of police, I should not allow people to work for me or the city to follow me. I should work for the city, and I work for the department. It's how I can better the lives of the men and women who serve in this uniform, as well as be a positive leadership role in the community. So I'm definitely all about the people, and I'm all about instilling love, because we can't do it alone as a law enforcement agency. It's going to take us in collaboration and partnerships with people in the city in order to make everything work in an orderly fashion. And I think that is what my legacy is, to leave here knowing that I did a very well job.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Ahmed.
Good evening.
So I saw on your resume that you're the Director of Recruiting. So this is from Category 9, Recruitment, Retention, and Personnel Support.
Sure.
And so one of the questions presented is that as Police Chief, you'll be given the final authority to make all hiring decisions. if you were presented with a new hire candidate whose hiring could be deemed as controversial by some, what would be the process you would employ in making your ultimate decision as to their employment?
Sure. So just a small correction. I'm the previous director of recruiting up until about 5 months ago. I currently work in media relations right now. Looking at the hiring process, we've made a lot of changes over the last 5 years under my directing there. And what I did was look at best practices and how they were hiring and retaining officers across the nation. There is definitely a process when it comes to civil service. There's a background investigation. First and foremost, in that process, an officer or an individual interested in becoming a police officer or a non-sworn personnel, they have to take a civil service test and obtain a 75% higher in the score to be eligible for that position. Once we get that information as a police officer, we call them in after we've requested multiple documents from them. When they come in to do a physical assessment, we bring them through a physical assessment where they're required to meet a certain set of standards based on push-ups, sit-ups, and running a mile and a half. When we get that candidate past that process, he's screened through a background investigation. He's screened through a voice stress analysis, which is a polygraph or the same thing. And after that, he'll go through a further background investigation. Once we look at those documents and we don't find any discrepancies that violates our employment requirements, then we'll set him up for an interview before a panel that's set by the chief's office. If he gets that score that puts him in a 70 or above percentage, he will be recognized as eligible for hire, and the chief will make that final selection of that candidate. We do follow the EOC rules and guidelines as well as ADA rules and regulations, so everyone is given a fair and impartial process.
So if I could follow up on that, in that kind of controversial aspect, is the interview before the chief's office what you would try to emphasize to make that determination, or would it focus more on that kind of actual investigative aspect, or how do you see that work?
Sure, there can be a multitude of things. So making sure we give everyone an equal opportunity is a very important thing. We're looking at their criminal background. We're looking at some things that they may have in their traffic record, their traffic history. All of these things are brought before the board, which is a two-part board. When that board interviews this candidate, they're going to ask them questions based on this background investigation and anything in their file that may be of question as his integrity to become a police officer. We're very careful with that, especially in this day. Looking at that, once that candidate again gets that passing score, it is always left on the discretion of the chief of police to make that final decision.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Victoria.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
My question is coming from the category of community engagement.
Sure.
What are your proposals concerning networking with other sectors of the community, churches, nonprofits, advocacy groups, etc., who work to address causes of crimes, poor education, job opportunity, addiction, etc.? What has been your experience in this area?
So yes, ma'am, I've worked side by side with our previous administration, but also being a recruiter, when we started to change up things, I went looking in a lot of different areas inside of the community. So a lot of times when the public's perception is through a different lens as us law enforcement officers, we have to understand that nature and how they see us versus how we may see the perfect candidate or what we may think the perfect candidate is. So when we're looking at community policing strategies, being out in the community, building those partnerships and those collaborations with the faith-based leadership communities. We're looking at drug rehabilitation centers, domestic violence outreach, gun violence reduction, and mental health and wellness programs. All of these things play a vital role in us building those relationships, right? And as long as we stay collaborating, especially as a leader in the community, not just as a police officer, but as public services, that is the only way that we'll be able to touch our young men and women. We'll be able to reduce the gun violence. At the same time, we'll be able to spot those perfect candidates that are out there assisting as we build these collaborations and these partnerships. And I think all of these things are very important. We all know that mental health, wellness is very important these days. It plays a big role in law enforcement and in our citizens because people tend to almost want to dehumanize police officers because of that title. But at the end of the day, we are husbands, we're wives, we're leaders, we wear many hats. So it's very important that we keep our police officers' mental health as well as the citizens' mental health. But those programs set in place, we have a lot of those initiatives going right now. And I think that they're very important and that we definitely should keep those initiatives going.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant, and kind of keeping it in line with one of my colleagues said, in regards to staffing and budgeting and equipment. What strategies will you employ? Because it sounds like some of the persons before you talked about the methods that you employ have been employing to recruit more persons to become police officers. I know there's a shortage in every aspect of employment throughout the whole country, throughout the state, throughout the city. What methods have you employed or employing to recruit more fine police officers to the Baton Rouge Police Department?
Sure. So working in collaboration again with our current administration as well as Mayor Broom, it's been a journey. We noticed that it's been very hard in these last 5 to 10 years to recruit nationwide. It's been a recruiting crisis. So I went to those websites and I did the research on best practices. And one of the things that we focused on was this is a different generation we're dealing with. And a lot of times we look at a 30-year career or 10 years in front of us when we plan ahead, not taking anything away from the young men and women in the community today, but they want to know how much money they're going to make now. So we have to make those adjustments on the police department when it comes to recruiting and retention. Not just can we hire them, but can we keep them, because it's a competitive industry nowadays. So looking at the budget, and I've never worked in budget, but I do understand a little bit about money. Continuing to focus a well-proposed annual budget each year with recruiting and retention being one of the highest priorities, as well as police officers' salaries. I think that's extremely important. I think that we should look at the different avenues that we can find additional funding so that we can recruit better police officers. It definitely is shown in the data that the more police officers we can recruit and that we can put on the streets to serve these communities and police these communities and keep them safe, crime does lower. So that's very important.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ahmed, what does your first 100 days look like? Rank the top 5 priorities and your process for accomplishing them.
I believe that in my first 100 days, the first thing would be to go in and look at the entire department and where we are. It would I would look at going to see how much money's in the budget. I would go and visit every single precinct so I can ask my officers, because again, I said in the beginning, I work for these guys. And instead of sitting up high looking down low, I need to be at the forefront on the ground with these gentlemen. That is a way that we can continue building morale, which is a very important thing. If we have happy officers and we have very productive officers, as well as very productive community leaders. And that would be the first and foremost thing, is to find out how I can be a better leader to these young men and women in the uniform. Second thing would be to audit the department, look at policies and procedures, continue these initiatives and these partnerships with things like the Chiefs Advisory Council. That was a very, very great thing that I think the chief did. I've sat in on a multitude of those meetings and just listening to what the city has to say and their thoughts, again, looking at us through a different lens, how we can better ourselves as an organization, even if it takes to change a few policies and procedures, instill a few initiatives. So it's going to be to audit everything that's going on. I can't say that I've made a 100% preparation because I've never been a chief of police. But what I can do is I can stand at my highest level of integrity and reach out to the people who I work for and find out the best methods that I can possibly do in my first 100 days, as well as what my mayor expects me to be as a leader.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
My question has to do with civilian oversight. I'm with Together Baton Rouge, and one of our important policies that we're trying to advocate for is adopting a form of civilian oversight. I'm interested in what you know about that, and then how you might incorporate civilian oversight into your administration.
Sure. So again, going back to the Chiefs Advisory Council with a civilian oversight, I think is a very good thing. Again, we use that term, bridging the gap, right? One city, one mission is a very important slogan we've been using in recruiting. But I think sometimes we only look at scratching the surface on those those subject topic matters. So having the civilians, okay, and who we work for, we are public servants. Of course, we wear many other hats. But I do agree that we should instill initiatives like that in collaboration with the other initiatives. I believe before the Chiefs Advisory Council, there was the community ambassadors where it began. And I've sat in on a few of those meetings as well. So to listen to some of our community activists, our faith-based leaders in the community, and to hear what they have to say, again, gives us an insight through their lens of how they view us and how we can be better community servants and public servants. I think that's very important. And I would definitely love to see that partnership in the future, if it's not already began with the initiative of the Chiefs Advisory Council. So absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Without discussing any details regarding the Brave Cave and related accusations, what steps would you take to ensure that this type of alleged activity would not occur again? And in your answer, put what checks and balances or accountability that you will institute to make sure that happens.
Oh, good question. So definitely, whatever we have going on currently in our investigations, I think it's very important that we remain transparent to the city. I think that we need to look at some of the policies and procedures. We also need to seek our legal advice as well, which is very important so that we make sure we're not violating anybody's civil rights. We look at policy and procedure within the police department, and we look at standard operational procedures, which are subdivided into the multiple divisions we do have. These policies and procedures, these standard operational procedures, as well as civil rights, is what keeps us in line as police officers. And if we follow these particular policies and procedures, we should not have those hiccups. I do think that we should do an annual audit of ourselves. There's always room for improvement, how we can be a better us, a better department every year, and better than last year. So there's always room for improvement, even as a human being. So I think with those type of things, nobody's perfect, mistakes will happen, and those liabilities will come back on us as leaders in the community. So I think it's very important, again, as Ms. Caldwell said, to keep the citizens involved in this as well. And if we can put in place a few more policies and procedures or add to what we currently have so we can have these checks and balances, we'll be able to reduce these liabilities. We'll be able to hold these officers accountable of anything that happened, because they can't come before us and say they didn't know when we already have given them policy and procedure. They're required to do that in the training academy. They have read the blue book. They know what they will violate, and if they violate this, that they have to hold accountability, which is also very important. So I think accountability and looking at these policies and procedures and continuing to go in and audit them and to redact or add additional policies and procedure in collaboration with the citizens of Baton Rouge, I think that's very important. And if we work together as a team, we'll make sure that these mistakes are reduced to a great minimum in the future. That is one of my major goals if I make chief of police, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, a point of personal privilege for a moment, if you will. I want to acknowledge the students from Episcopal School of Baton Rouge and their teacher, Dr. Rebecca Kuhn. These are members of a class called Service Learning and Community Impact, and they are here out in the classroom of the world. And wonderful. So I wanted to recognize and acknowledge them.
Thank y'all for being here.
Mr. Ahmed,
yes.
As you well know, ours is a multicultural community with a growing population of refugees from various parts of the world.
Yes, sir.
Can you address how you handle this now, what your position is in dealing with what I suppose would be a law enforcement issue?
Sure. I'll go back to when I was in the recruiting office as the director there. That was one of the goals and initiatives that I put in place and following the expectations of the current administration and best practices. So we look at the city that we live in, and it has a very great array of demographics in it, which is a wonderful thing. They call us a melting pot for a reason here. But what I want to say is when you look at the police department out front and the citizens, when we make contact, technically, as human beings, people like to see a reflection of themselves when speaking with a leader in the police department. So one of my main initiatives was, how can I make this department a reflection of the community we serve? Our Hispanic population is growing. Our Asian population is growing. Our females are starting to take law enforcement careers as an interest, which we were loving that. So we wanted to know, how can we put these additional recruiting tactics and strategies in place to seek out young women involved that is interested in law enforcement. We looked at the Spanish population, looking at how we can increase that. And we were very successful over the last 5 years. I've seen, and we've hired more young ladies, and we've hired more Hispanic officers than I've seen in my 20 years, just in the last 5 years. We'll continue reaching out those initiatives. Currently, we have something that we are working in collaboration with the community college and other local educational organizations, where we're going into the junior highs and the high schools to recruit them at an early age, because we call it a pipeline program. And we're looking at bringing them in at ages 14 to 18 as police explorers. That way we do various things with them. We look at these children who don't have opportunities to come out of a neighborhood where they may be poverty stricken, and we spend time with them. Those are community outreach programs. When they turn 18 and they graduate from high school, we introduce them to the cadet program, where we pay them a full-time salary and we work around their college schedule. As we instill in them, we wish they would go to a community college or a local college here and get an associate's degree. So this pipeline program, they turn 21, is an incentive that we're looking to keep a demographically built police department and a reflection of the city. And it's been very productive thus far, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening,
question
ma'am.
comes from standards and strategies, and in light of what the news is reporting as a domestic violence related homicide that happened this weekend, my question is about DV. Domestic violence has been on the rise in our community, and as chief of police, do you have any new ideas or initiatives that the department can initiate to help reduce those numbers?
Yes, ma'am. It is definitely our goal to reduce anything dealing with domestic violence. That has been a situation as far as I can think back as a child. Domestic violence is a serious issue. And one of the things that we partnership with one of the organizations is the Butterfly Society. And we ask the people in the city, as we attend these community outreach programs, to go and talk to these young women, encourage these young women, instill in them what to look for and the signs to look for in a man that may put them in a domestic violence situation. So if we can continue to partner with some of these people when it comes to peer support programs, and we can get these women the help that they need, I think that's extremely important. Because what a lot of people, again, I'll use that scratch the surface term they're not looking at is, what about the youth that's around this domestic violence when it's happening? The young men that's seeing this. At some point, it's implicitly instilled in that young man's head that this is okay to treat someone like this, or a young lady who sees her mother mentally or physically abuse her father. Domestic violence could go both ways. So I think peer support groups, again, connecting with the faith-based leadership in the communities and keeping these families involved, it starts in the home. It starts with the power of prayer. And I'm sorry I may have bring that before the council, but I'm a believer in God, and I think that's very important in the home. I think that keeping these children abreast, holding them accountable, spending time every day with your children and as a family is going to be some initiatives that we should look into in collaboration and partnership with the already initiatives we have in place. I think that the more we talk about it, the more that we influence people to come forth about it, the more assistance that we can provide and make it our utmost responsibility to continue having these women and these children and these men put in places where they receive assistance. Yes, ma'am, that's extremely important. You're welcome.
Thank you, Sergeant. No further questions.
Thank you, sir.
Hello again, Mr. Ahmed. So this question isn't from any of the categories, but it's a follow-up to one of the other members, I think it was Mr. Gibson's question, where you talked about doing an annual audit and thinking about, you touched on transparency. What would you do to make sure that the community was aware of those audit's findings? Would you release the audit to the public? Would you release investigations to the public? I know one thing that the Advocate reported on was that the Narcotics Division investigation still has not been made public after 2 years. And so I'm wondering what your approach to an investigation like that and the general audit would be.
Sure. So going back to one of the things I believe Ms. Jennifer Caldwell said was the initiatives that she's trying to instill is bringing the citizens in. And I think building a blueprint to where we partner with a civilian staff or organization and we bring them in to work with us in being transparent. When we say audit, we'll look at how we can make ourselves better every year. When we look at our funding, we look at are we spending our money in the proper places, which is the citizens' tax dollars. And I think that's very important that they know where their tax dollars is going, how it's being used within the police department, and also how it's being used to give back in some of the community initiatives. So building a blueprint without doing that yet, I think it will be important to build a board, okay, or a particular initiative where civilians and police officers, as well as people from the mayor's office, sit together with our accounting divisions, and we audit particular funding. We audit policies and procedures. We audit some of the transparency of the incidents that we may have been dealing with in the city. And I think that's very important that we keep doing that. As long as we sit at a table together, I think we're going to make some very, very, very good moves in this city, because a lot of people are concerned more so about what they don't know. People fear what they don't know. So if you are made aware that there's trouble, and you're made aware that there's a group of people who all work as leaders in this community, and we're steady making these building blocks to make it a better place, that's my goal, is to be as transparent as we can in collaboration with someone from the Chiefs Advisory Council or a board of citizens that are leaders and community activists in this city. That's going to be my goal. We'll do this together.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and no further questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
Start. Do you support having 2 law enforcement units represent the members of the Baton Rouge Police Department?
Can you ask that question again, sir?
Do you support having 2 law enforcement unions representing the members of the Baton Rouge Police Department?
I would support those unions in the efforts to support the police officers. I think these unions were put in place long before I was born. I belong to both of those unions. And what I would love to see is that we build on those relationships with these unions. We stay transparent with one another and listen to their expectations and what their goals may be to make us a better agency. But I think at some point we're going to have to come together again as a people, involve those citizens, get their opinions on what they see through the union's lens, what they see through the police officer's lens as well as the citizen's lens. At some point, I believe we can find that happy medium. It was once told to me by a wise man, 2 things: always be myself. If being myself got me this far, then why do I need to change now? Right? So as the chief of police, it is definitely my goal to be very transparent with the people of my expectations in hopes that they'll follow my leadership, in hopes that I can influence the young men and women in this uniform, and most importantly, the younger generation of men and women in this community. That union plays a vital role in the mental health and wellness and how we think about things in this job, how we wake up every morning wanting to get up and put this badge back on. So if we can come together again with these 2 unions abreast, and we can build a companionship and a collaboration where we all work together, that is the goal, that is the strategy. And I do feel positive about that being a positive effort in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ahmed, describe a situation where you made a decision that was met with a negative outcome. How did you handle the feedback from your supervisor?
I've been put in many situations where I thought I did the right thing. And sometimes as an individual, we may think that doing the right thing morally is what we should have done. I can't remember a particular situation in which I've been put in that predicament. But I do know that there has been times where I thought I was doing the right thing morally, but it wasn't what my supervisor told me to do. And in that situation, I had to take accountability because I didn't follow his leadership. So I could not be mad at that supervisor for holding me accountable because he told me not to do it for a reason. But morally, I thought that it should have been done. So it could have been right, it could have been wrong, but at the end of the day, I didn't follow my orders.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yes, ma'am.
So being the chief of police is similar to being a CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation. You oversee hundreds of staff, you would oversee a budget of millions of dollars, and manage thousands of dollars of thousands of physical resources. So tell us a little bit about what in your background you've experienced that makes you qualified to serve at this level at this time.
I've never been a CEO of a company, and I've never been the chief of police. But in my background and understanding and hiring and recruiting these young men and women over the last 5 years, I've seen a lot of policy and procedures, and I've overled a lot of the hiring process, knowing I was being held accountable by particular rules and guidelines put in place, so there was no room for error, right? But if I had to look into the future as me being a leader, a chief of police, or a CEO of a company, I think it would be more so about building the proper team of people around me. If I'm the only smartest person in the room, then I'm in the wrong room. And I think surrounding myself around people who have better ideas and brighter ideas than me is what it takes and what it means to be a great leader, because I was willing to listen. So yes, ma'am, at some point, I don't have any experience in that field, but placing myself around the proper administration and not being the smartest man in the room would be my goal in learning how to lead from the ground, not from the top. Yes, ma'am.
No further questions at this time.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ahmed, I know that the Baton Rouge Police Department has put a lot of emphasis and money into technology, a real-time crime center, and so forth.
Yes,
as
sir.
you are looking forward to the future as a possible police chief,
Yes, sir.
how would you utilize the most recent current technical advances?
I think utilizing these most recent and technological advances is a great thing. Anything that we can use to our advantage in order to look into a crime, okay, or to predict that a crime may happen. That might sound like that's in futuristic movies, but there's technology out there being created. And if I'm ever allowed to go to some of these technologically advanced fairs and look at the most technology, if it's in our budget to continue to implement that within our police department, we will look into it with the approval of the partnership with the citizens, as long as it is a betterment for the city and for the department. And if it is in a reduction of crime when it comes to gun violence, drug abuse, drug violence, mental health, and wellness, we will continue to research the best practices on the most technological advances in law enforcement moving forward.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My last question is, what do you feel is the most important pillar of the 21st century policing tenets?
I think it's going to be community policement. How you build that relationship with your city is the most important thing. Again, I came here 20 years ago when policing was very different. We look at where we are today, and sad to say, in 2016, during the Alton Sterling incident, that changed policing across the nation as we know it today, probably across the world. Our leaders have had to look at recalibrating policies and procedures. We also had to look at the hurt that was going on in these communities, because how sometimes they may have felt oppressed, or they saw us in a different lens that we didn't realize they saw us. And we would never have known that, yet we set out front and we start asking these people. So forming these community initiatives, going out, touching the youth, walking from door to door in these communities and asking them, how can we be an assistance in cleaning up your neighborhood, or providing some kind of mental health initiative or some kind of financial assistance? And if we can't do it, who can we reach out to as a leader in that community to get that done? So I do think that community policing and how we build that relationship within the city of Baton Rouge is where we need to change law enforcement nationwide and around the world. We work for the city of Baton Rouge. And as the chief of police, again, I work for the citizens of Baton Rouge. So if they can instill in me what it is best for me to instill in my officers, that is the best route that we need to take, because I think if the people are happy, if the police officers are happy, and again, we've built that board of transparency, it falls back into community policing. And I think that's very important, continuing to build those partnerships and to continue to be transparent and to stay out in these schools where it's very important to be amongst these youth. The influence starts from the bottom up, just as it does in home, but as leaders in the community, as police officers, we don't just wear a badge, we wear multiple hats. Sometimes we have to be a father, we have to be a mother, and as that officer, you should understand that you signed up to play those many roles, because it's how you influence. Not everybody deserves to go to jail. Not everybody deserves a traffic ticket.
What's your time on that question,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ahmed?
Yes, sir.
You now have 2 minutes to make a closing statement.
Thank you all for having me here today and for giving me the opportunity to be on this journey as the chief of police. Again, I really feel like it was a calling. I prayed on that before I even put that application in, because I do know it's a tough job. And I felt like if I was put out in front of this city, it would be a calling and an expectation of me by my higher God in order to do that job. There will be no failures. There are going to be many mistakes. But I feel like when we go through these eras of adversity and when we face challenges, those are the building blocks to greatness. There's no success without failure. But I also think that was important, what you said, Ms. Carwile, about us building a citizen board and keeping that community involved. So me being myself has gotten me this far. I'm going to continue to be myself if I'm selected as the chief of police. And if I'm not selected as the chief of police, I'm going to still continue being a positive leader and a positive influence in this community, because this, again, is the only home I've had, and I don't plan on leaving. So thank you again so much for having me here. This has been quite a journey and a pleasure to speak with you all today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll hear from William Clarida. Clarida. Thank you. Let me write that pronunciation on my paper. You ready to be drinking all them Cokes, man. Well, in that case, bring me one too. Good afternoon, Mr. Clarida.
Good afternoon.
I'm Lamont Cole, chairman of the Police Chief Review Committee. The way the interview process is going to work, you'll have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Each committee member can ask up to 2 questions. We may not ask 2, but we can ask up to 2 questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each question, and then you'll have 2 minutes to make a closing remark. Let me know when you're ready.
I do have a handout. Would y'all like that now or after?
Which would you prefer?
Now would be fine.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, or actually good evening, committee members. To all who are present, either in person or are watching us live from home. I would like to start with a Bible verse from the Old Testament, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. I believe that's what most people want when it comes to living life. The hope to not be harmed, to have dreams and a future. As police officers, we enter into this profession knowing we will never become wealthy, but have the hope that we can somehow make a difference, see results from our efforts, hear somebody say thank you. Many years ago, I answered the call for public service. I never realized or dreamed that more than 30 years later, I would have the opportunity to stand before a community and ask to be able to lead so many incredible, selfless men and women that are trying to make a difference. It is humbling. I'm a proud, long-term, 30-year veteran of the Baton Rouge Police Department. I'm married. I have 1 child. I moved to Baton Rouge in 1977 when I was 8 years old. And with the exception of about 8 years living in Denham Springs, this has been my home. I live in East Baton Rouge, pay taxes in East Baton Rouge. I raise my family in East Baton Rouge. I'm blessed to be one of those people that say, I cannot believe that they pay me to come to work. Say it all the time. I've worked many places in the department as well as the city. That's given me a complete perspective on operations for the city police. Starting as a patrolman in the Gus Young area, being accepted into the K-9 division, then narcotics, then the highway interdiction unit, then being promoted to supervisor, where I began my tenure of supervising, managing, and commanding officers of the Uniform Patrol Division. Highway interdiction, back to K-9, back to uniform, and now in administration. A little bit of personal information about me is that I met my wife 25 years ago this month at a K-9 demonstration at her mother's school. She fell in love with the dog, and if the dog could have driven, I think I would have been left out. But since he couldn't. Over time, I estimate that I have personally supervised over 200 individual officers on a one-to-one level. Chief Paul had the confidence to allow me to be named as the first commander over the Real-Time Crime Center, then to be named as the Assistant Uniform Patrol Commander, then to the Uniform Patrol Commander, and most recently, I've taken on the responsibilities of the Deputy Chief over Uniform Patrol. On a daily basis, I oversee about 350 officers and oversee the $40 million budget. I know I'm running short on time.
Oh, you passed your time. I'm giving you a little extra. You can make your closing statement.
We can answer it there. We can get to answering questions, sir. I was having fun. It was good.
Good evening, Commander. I see you've had a lot of leadership billets within BRPD over your career. If you could reorganize one department or several departments, if you were chief, what departments would those be and why?
Reorganization, in my opinion, would require a need. We have a lot of areas that definitely need some looking at, some improvement. I think that we could look to improve how we handle our extra duty. I think that could be an area that we check into to see to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. Every chief that's come before me, and it's been 9, has at one time or another moved bureaus or divisions from one place to another for one reason or another. I don't believe in just moving a division from one place to another. There would have to be a legitimate reason. So I would have no plans to just disrupt everything.
So if I could just follow up just very briefly, so do you see a need for any reorganization?
No, some house cleaning possibly.
Thank you.
No reorganization.
How you doing, Mr. Clarida?
Good, sir.
Got it correct this time. So my question is from category 8. It's data technology and transparency. And given your leadership of the Real-Time Crime Center, I was curious of what are any nascent practices or technologies that you believe BRPD could use to achieve its mission of protecting and serving the public. But with that, do any of those practices present privacy or concerns of personal rights, and how would you balance the needs of the department and the needs of individuals?
Well, as far as technology goes, we're into a lot of different technologies that assist us daily. The Crime Center has partnered with organizations to assist in getting cameras put up that have already shown a difference in combating crime, caught crimes in progress. LPR technology that has assisted us to make sure if there are wanted people, wanted vehicles, that those are addressed. As far as any privacy concerns, we make very sure that any of our cameras that we have up do not face into a private area. It's all public domain. So anywhere that a person can go is where a camera could be pointed. So we're very, very conscious of that. As far as we have what's called the Connect Blue program with the department, where we encourage people, if they would like to participate and help their neighborhoods, they can sign up to say they have cameras, but we specifically state that we do not want private cameras, only the public facing. So I don't see any privacy issues there.
And then just a quick follow-up, what is LPR technology?
License plate reader.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Very big. A lot of neighborhoods have them.
Mr. Clarida, my question is coming from the personal approach and leadership. This agency has a history of policy challenges resulting in thousands of taxpayers' dollars being paid out in lawsuit settlements. If selected for this position, what is your plan to bring all policies and procedures into immediate compliance with current law?
I'd say that if we are out of compliance, that those are already looked at. We have a consistent review of all policies. But what I would like to see done is I would like to re-implement something we had years ago. It was called the Staff Inspection Division, where they would go through and they would look at all of the divisions to make sure that those divisions were in compliance with what was in policy and that all the records needed to be kept. They were taking care of that. And I'm not sure, it's been a little while, but at some point we did get away from it. I would like to have that re-implemented, but I'd also like to bring in some civilian assistance on that. That way they can kind of have an idea of what we do on a daily basis and give input.
And again, you would like to re-implement, what was that again?
It's a division that we used to have in place. It was called the Staff Inspection Division or something thereof. And they were tasked with going to each specific division to make sure that that division was in compliance with policy, kind of like oversight for each specific division. I would like to bring that back. Yes, ma'am.
How you doing, Mr. Clarida?
Good, sir.
Did I pronounce it correct? Clarida?
I'll answer to pretty much anything close. It's Clarida, yes,
Chief,
sir.
all right.
Chief would be fine, yes, sir.
So I understand that you've been up under 8 chiefs. You alluded to thereabout.
I think Chief Paul might be number 9.
Okay. Since the 1960s, the Baton Rouge Police Department has been in a consent decree. only recently was it settled. What are your plans to ensure that it doesn't go back under a federal consent decree?
Yeah, it was for 38 years it was under, and if I'm not mistaken, in 2020 is when we were removed from it.
Right.
And that was specifically regarding hiring practices. And obviously, consent decrees can come based upon what a federal judge or the feds would look to want to have oversight for. And I think that goes back to what we talk about regarding policy oversight. And a lot of that might come with the transparency piece where you're very straightforward with what you're doing. I think that the consent decree would come into play is if they find wrongdoing and you did really nothing to kind of rectify the problem.
Specific, I think it was dealing with the hiring, promotion, retention, discipline. I remember reading it. I had a copy of it.
And
all of
the
those.
hiring is what stuck out to me, sir.
Right,
So,
right.
yes, sir.
So what are your plans to ensure that, during the hiring process, during the retention of good officers, a diverse department, a retention, discipline, because a lot of times I would get complaints as the NAACP branch president that the discipline was uneven. Black officers were disciplined harsher opposed to their white counterparts. And so those are the parts of the things that the consent decree say has to be cleaned up. And so what do you propose to ensure that we don't go backwards?
As far as hiring practices, we got to make sure that we are hiring along the same lines as our demographic within the city. Our police department should reflect what our city looks like. As far as what you're referencing with discipline, and I might be stepping off into another area, but I believe that we should look to change discipline and how we do it. We should actually have half of our discipline review board be civilians and the other half be officers, but they represent the three major groups as far as FOP, Union, and Magnolia. Have one from each of those. With the civilians, they can review the cases after they're investigated, make recommendations, but the chief has to have the ultimate say-so because he's the appointing authority.
Right, Mr. Loretta?
Yes, sir.
What does the first 100 days look like, and rank the top 5 priorities in your process for accomplishing them?
And what I gave y'all is I do have a listing of the first 100 days. I've looked at them time and time again, and there's so much information. First and foremost, I have to meet with my boss. I have to meet with Mayor Broom. We have to be on the same page as to what the objective is and what she would like. I also have to meet with my officers. I have to meet with the senior staff. I have to meet with the Metro Council. And I have to make sure that we have a relationship from the beginning moving forward. Because I know as of late there's been a little bit of back and forth with the chief and so forth. I got to make sure that I meet with officers directly in their home as far as their districts. Face them, look at them, answer the hard questions, dispel any rumors. Got to make sure that moving forward, there's a clear understanding as to what I would expect and what they would expect from me. There has to be engagement with the community itself. I can tell you right now that you have to be present in the community face to face. And on a more personal level is where you're going to get the best results. But as far as if it needs to be with a larger group, that way you can get the message out, then that's fine as well. But like I said, I have several really good ideas. It's just, that's kind of off the top of my head. And you said 5, what were the 5 other ones?
What were the top 5 priorities?
Top 5 priorities. And that kind of touched on the majority of them. First and foremost, you got to deal with making sure you start building trust back with the community, which that deals with the face-to-face interaction. You have to build trust back with officers. I think that's where we start. And then that also in itself will help to start building morale back.
Okay, and that really kind of is where my next question was leading, was about morale. We've had stories of some bad apples in the department. I'm interested in how you would promote morale while also holding bad apples accountable.
Well, I'll kind of go backwards. Holding bad apples accountable, that's easy. Because if they're shown to be incorrect in what they've done, then they're going to have to atone for what they've done. They're going to have to be dealt with either if it's as minor as a correction of a verbal nature or retraining, if it deals with something as serious as discipline, and that can go all the way up to separation from the department, up to arrest. So, and I can tell you right now that nobody dislikes a bad cop worse than a good cop. We want to make sure, because we're out there every day pushing, trying to make sure that what we're doing is above board and straightforward, and then we have somebody come behind us and take our feet out from underneath us. As far as morale goes, I can tell you that anytime in the past 30 years of my career when there's been the anticipation of a chief leaving, and leading up to that, a lot of times morale gets a little low. People are anticipating the worst. So once a chief is named, regardless of where they would come from or who it might be that y'all, choose, morale will start to improve. And the best feedback I've ever gotten is sitting in front of those guys and having conversations, because they say that they just feel like they're left in the dark. So I think that's where we start. Yes, ma'am.
Without discussing any details regarding the Brave Cave and related accusations, what steps would you take to ensure that this type of alleged activity would not occur? Specific checks and balances, what would you do? I think most of these involve plainclothes, narcotics, street crime, so forth. What would you do to ensure that that would not happen again?
Well, anytime we have a breakdown in that type of a service with the department, and it ends up being kind of like what we're dealing with now, and please understand, I have limited knowledge, but if I have any, obviously I can't really push forth on that. You have to make sure that you address those specific issues before you can start to rebuild that. Is it to the point where you have to start over from ground zero with all new people? It's possible. But you have to address where the problem lies to start. As far as how can you ensure that it doesn't happen, you have to have the right people in place that have their eyes open. You have to have the people that are overseeing people that do that job, that can make sure that they are looking at what's going on, they're following behind, and that those processes that protect the department, the citizens, and the officers themselves are being followed. You got to have the right champions. And I'm going to have to give Chief Paul credit because that's his word, but I believe in it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Clarida, this question comes from Officer Wellness and Well-Being category. How will you address the mental health challenges that officers may face and ensure their holistic well-being, particularly after distressing incidents?
We've made strides, great strides, as of late. We have a bolstered peer support group that is very proactive. I've made sure that I work in conjunction with them. I happen to be in a position where I can actually assist them in the event it's been told to me that an officer is going through a crisis. We can help facilitate some time off for them if they need counseling, whatever it might be, because a lot of times, before it gets to the breaking point, you got to make sure that you address them directly and say, hey, we see something's going on. We need to make sure that we kind of scale back a little bit and try to get you some help. And that obviously protects them, but it protects the integrity of the squad, the department, and the citizens as well, and their safety. So we've done great things. We can also look to assist with getting some licensed professionals to come in and actually be available, which we have them now. We can send people for assistance, but we can probably partner with an organization or a group that maybe we could kind of call ours, if that makes sense.
So the police department contracts out its psychological counseling?
As far as, to my knowledge, we have people that we can send officers to if we foresee there's an issue that, they would deal with direct. But as far as an officer wants to seek counseling on his own, that's going to be on him. We will work with them on that. And it's all through health and safety. And a lot of that, because of the regulations and HIPAA, I mean, I've asked questions, and when I get too close, I'm like, I can't really talk about it. So I don't want to speak on something that I don't 100% know about. But I know that we are making steps to address those problems and going as far as we can with it to help.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your document because it's making it difficult for me to find questions.
That was my strategy.
So my question, I've never asked this to a candidate because you've made it hard. Here's my question. What are your standards of holding bad acting officers accountable while supporting, promoting the morale and pride within the ranks? What has been your experience in this area?
If we're upfront and we're honest about what's going on, a lot of times that alleviates those questions that come up with the officers that are not directly involved. As far as the holding of accountability, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Like I said a minute ago, if we got a bad apple, then we address the bad apple, and it depends upon the severity as to what's going on with them. It could be training, could be discipline, like I said, could be suspension, could be admin leave. It just depends upon the severity. But the way that I look at things is that if we are open about it, we're honest with the officers as much as we can, because some of that's investigations that go on. And we're fair. You got to be fair about it. You got to be fair and consistent with this one, the same as with this one. It has to be the same. So however I treat this one, that's how I'm going to treat that one. You know what I'm saying? It just kind of, just being consistent with it. Yes, ma'am. And I didn't say it a while ago, and I apologize for breaking in. Anything that y'all wanted to discuss in any of my records, I did state that I was very open to that. If there's any questions about anything as far as in my internal affairs jacket, anything y'all read, please ask, and I will do everything I can to answer.
Thank you, Commander. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Yes.
So one more question for you, Mr. Clarida. You've worked in a whole mess of divisions, Uniform Patrol, Crime Center, K-9, and given your breadth of experience, this question's from Category 11, possible questions for current BRPD candidates. Throughout the time, your time at BRPD and these different divisions, have you or the divisions you've been in responded to difficulties and scandals related to other divisions? So I know that the K-9 division changed its juvenile policy. We've had the street crimes unit, the narcotics division. Did you adopt, suggest, or implement any new policies, and what's been their result?
I have not personally adopted or suggested any changes. If my input was requested, I've always been glad to give it. And at the level I'm at now, I've been where I'm at maybe about 3.5 years, which is the executive level of administration. We do have conversations about problems that occur. How did they come about? What can we do to help rectify it? So if you're asking if I've had any direct contact with making those changes, my answer would be up to this point, no. But I have had input in problems that have come up, and how can we make sure it doesn't happen again?
So just following up on that, and however you can explain, could you give an example of what that kind of input looks like or what that process is?
Well, sure. Anytime we do have a problem and say an officer comes in for discipline and we have the conversation with him as to what happened, we let him tell his side. If we find where something wasn't very clear or specific in policy, then those changes have to be made to address those. So, and recently we did have, and you asked now, and the way you asked that question, we had to alter the wording in some of the policies to kind of, I guess, close a gap. That way there was no miscommunication. And it may have had to do with extra duty, but I don't want to speak out on that one. But yes, suggestions to address problems within those.
Great, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I am, you said that you would check how extra duty is being handled. Once you check out and you find some things that may not be up to par, How would you handle that moving forward? And would that be a part of your first 100 days to check into that?
It will be part of the first 100 days. I want to make sure that if there's a company now that kind of helps with that aspect, and we've had meetings with at least one to where they can come in and help manage the extra duty portion of what we do. It takes the responsibility, and it's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of extra duty that comes through. There's technology now that can help to make sure that there's no overlap as far as schedules for the working officers. It's kind of like a check and balance. And like I said, they got apps now for everything. You can do apps for anything. And this is no different. This would basically keep track of what happened with the officers, what they work, make sure that they're in compliance with their schedule, make sure that if they're taking off, that it's the proper type of leave, that type of thing. And look, extra duty, since I've been here, depends on who's been in there and how many people, it's always been a challenge. And we've had different ways of documenting it. I just think that we can step forward and look at technology to assist us to monitor that, to make sure that we're in compliance.
I have no further questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Clarida. I have no further questions.
I do have one other. Keeps doing that. I do have one other question, and that is, I know that we are many officers short, so do you have any ideas of how you might address recruitment or retention? Any unique ideas?
Recruitment, there's an in-progress piece going on, and I'm sure y'all have heard about. We have a really good guy, and again, we have a champion in place that's been helping with that. He might need some help because he's a very busy guy. We're already doing some of the right things. We're going to the right places. We're asking for help from the right places to get the right people. We want to make sure that we get quality as much as quantity. So we have somebody really good doing that. Obviously, pay for officers. Anybody that's coming here initially, they look at the pay. What does it pay to come? To stay here on the retention side, though, you have to make sure that you give them something more than pay, because after a while, it's not enough. They have to feel as though they're being treated fairly. They have to have a voice in what goes on, and they have to make sure that they feel wanted as far as their job goes. So that's kind of part of the retention piece. We also have looked at financial incentives on the retention side as well to help boost with education pay. We're kind of pulling out all stops because we've been successful, but I think we're on a good path. So, yes, ma'am.
No further questions?
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
No further questions.
I'm ready, guys. Come on.
Bring it on.
All right.
Yeah, we see.
Close remarks. I'll be shorter. It's much shorter.
You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. As I began my opening remarks with a Bible quote from the Old Testament, I will begin my closing remarks with a quote from Rocky Balboa. It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. We've been hit pretty hard lately as a department. I don't see anybody not getting up and moving forward. The same as a fellow candidate who has already interviewed with y'all, everything involving the day-to-day operations of the chief's office that I am currently doing, participate in, and have knowledge of is my current job. My learning curve in hitting the ground running will be very minimal. Excuse me. This is not a been there, done that scenario. This is a I am here and I am doing it situation. I have a deep faith in God. Keeps me grounded, a strong moral compass that points north. And I am seasoned in my decision making. Y'all notice I didn't say I was older. I will be fair, firm, non-biased, and available in my tenure as chief. I'll leave you with this. If you demand excellence, but you accept mediocrity, mediocrity becomes the standard. Baton Rouge does not deserve a mediocre police department. They should demand an excellent one. I ask that you consider me to be the chief that delivers excellence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee break, or we want to move to the third? Next, we'll hear from Alvin Davis. Gotta ask.
They fall too long.
Gotta ask. Gotta ask.
That's how you jump on me and run out. See, Cat, you should have said something to you.
Yeah, I was excellent. Can I pass it down? This is a press release that just came out. This is important. Mayor Brooms. Pass this down and pass it down. Look, yeah. I'll get it for you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. My name is Lamont Cole. I'm the chairman of the Police Chief Review Committee.
Good evening.
And the way this interview is going to happen is you're going to have 3 minutes to make an opening statement. And then each committee member can ask up to 2 questions from a list of categories we have. We may not ask 2, but we can ask up to 2. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each question. And then at the end of the rounds of questions, you'll have 2 minutes to make a closing remark.
Yes,
so you let me know when you're ready to begin, and you have 3-minute opening statement.
Yes, sir.
All right.
I'm not sure. Okay.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
It's on you.
Yes, sir. I'd like to, first of all, thank you guys for even giving me this opportunity to come here to be the chief of police of Baton Rouge. I'm from Baton Rouge, but I live in Tennessee now, and the military and the other police department kind of took me away when I was 18. And I don't know how it happened that this even landed in front of me like it did. I guess God works in mysterious ways, but I seem like everything else just started falling into place for me. So I just have a feel that we have to do something for our community to connect the police back to the community. And we just have this big disconnect right now. And that's why before I retired from Memphis Police Department, I was a lieutenant there for 22 years. Then I was police in Norfolk, Virginia for 4 years before that. Then I retired from the military after 20 years. I was a military police. So I've kind of been all over the place and did a lot of stuff. But I just feel like we need to, the biggest thing is connect back to the community, gain their trust, and do whatever we can do to put Baton Rouge back on the map to be one of the bigger, better cities that it used to be, and get back where we need to be. That'll be my opening statement.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. As you mentioned, I see you have civilian and military experience, and given that you've seen the 2 different types of leadership skills and sets, what do you think is the most important attribute a police chief in Baton Rouge should have? And given that trait, can you give us an example of how you've exhibited that trait in your law enforcement or military experience?
I feel like one of the biggest things you need to do, first of all, in order to get the city where you want it to be, you're going to have to connect to the community to make them feel like they're part of the solution. You can't just go in as a police department and say, this is what we're going to do. You have to involve the citizens in it. And the way I used to do that when I had officers went out, at the time I had about 30 officers working for me. We did community enforcement, but I explained to them that I used to go out, once I got everybody out patrolling, I used to go out and meet with the community myself, get out on foot, talk to the community. You just can't always meet everybody in a negative situation. Kind of like the fire department. Everybody loves to see the fire department. Police show up, it's like, you're getting in the back seat. So you have to meet and connect with the community in a different standard. So you got to have those days. And I tell them, get out and do some foot patrol. They did that way, way back in the day. But I think connecting to the community, being honest with them, being open with them, once they buy in, it's easy. Like I said, it takes a village. So we can't do it ourselves. The citizens are going to have to help us with that as well. But I think that's one of the most important things.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How you doing, Mr. Davis?
Mr. Davis, make sure the green light is on your mic. They can't hear you outside. At the bottom of the mic, at the base, There should be a green light on, and make sure you're speaking into it, okay?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, Mr. Davis?
Fine, and you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. And thank you for coming down all the way from Tennessee. We all appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
So, kind of like Mr. Green's question, given your civilian and military experience, this question's from Category 12, possible questions for non-BRPD candidates. I'm curious, how has your experience with your previous departments, including military police, provided you with insight or information, whether that's structure, procedures, collaboration with other agencies, that can inform your leadership if selected as the chief of police in Baton Rouge? And are there any specific policies that you'd like to see implemented?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. But some of the policies that I learned from Memphis Police Department was totally different from Norfolk Police Department. I mean, it's like two different worlds. Even the demographics are totally different. So with that being said, I think that once we start talking into the community and getting feedback from the community, I have no problem with having a community board that's part of our selection or that's part of the whole solutions to different things that we deal with. So one of the things we did was called PACE, Police Assisted Community Enforcement, and that was in Norfolk, Virginia. And that was where we went out, got with the community, we took insight, and we would bring it to city council, and we would address it. And if people was okay with giving us their names, we'll put that out there, make calls back to them and explain to them that we're trying to implement different things based on what the community see the problem being. So that to me is one of the biggest things we need to implement.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Davis.
Good evening.
This is coming from personal approach and leadership, and this question was actually submitted by a candidate being considered for this role. What is important to consider during the transition of the Baton Rouge Police Department leadership?
What is important?
What is important to consider
Yes, ma'am.
during the transition in the Baton Rouge Police Department leadership?
One of the most important things is to be consistent and be honest with the other chief that's retiring or going out, or however you want to put it. You're going to have a turnover, a proper turnover from them in order to understand what's going on, especially for guys like myself or females that's coming from out of state, because departments run different ways. So you're going to definitely have a hands-on approach and have a chief that's leaving that's going to be honest to say we need to use exhibit X, Y, and Z in order for you to have a smooth transition. Or the assistant chief of police that's still there, that's not moving on, you're going to have to connect to them and try to get insight on what you need to do for that department or which way you might want to go. Some things are going to be the right way, some are going to be the wrong way. And we know that because if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be here today looking for a chief of police. So that's how I kind of look at that. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Davis, how you doing there?
Fine, and you, sir?
How has, this is coming from possible questions for non-candidates, how has your experience with your previous department or agency provided you with insider information such as structure, procedures, collaboration, etc., that can form your leadership if selected as the new chief of police? What have you done at your old department that you can bring down here and utilize?
Well, one of the things I started doing, I was at one of the most dangerous precincts in the city when I was there in Memphis, and that was Crump Station. So we started doing I know it may sound kind of different, but we started doing simple things like car shows and going out with the kids. And we do this thing called Trunk or Treat. You know, they did it last night, and I was supposed to be there, but I was on my way here because I had to do that 6-hour drive. But we would do Trunk or Treat every year with the kids. We would do the parades with the kids. And it was just amazing how my chief would come to me and say, it's funny how your precinct bought totally into what you were doing, and we having problems with other precincts. Next thing I know, I got moved because what I did to work over there, they wanted to implement it in different parts. You know, I couldn't be in two places at the same time. And that's kind of how I ended up with recruiting. They said we had a recruiting situation. So I just feel like you just have to be hands-on, go out there, and you can talk it, but you got to walk it. So that's me. And I just go out and deal directly with the community. But that was one of our biggest things. And not the chief I have now, which was Chief Davis. We had Chief Armstrong before that, Tony Armstrong. And some of you guys probably have seen him because, unfortunately, Memphis made the first 48 famous, and we know why that happened. But you would see Tony Armstrong out there, and I became real close to him. And I would go out with him to do different things in the community, and he was just that approachable person. And you just got to get your officers to buy in, your execs that's with you to buy in, and once you get them there, then it makes it a better deal for everybody to work out and get the community with us.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, what does your first 100 days look like, and can you rank the top 5 priorities of your process for accomplishing them?
First 100 days would be try to get, once I talk to the assistant, the chief that's currently here, and I try to figure out all my paperwork, what I need to do, the union, and once I get that kind of figured out on the first, that'll be part of the first 100 days, I think you need to go out and address each precinct. You know, you need to take the time and go when the guys are doing roll call and go out and talk to them to, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, where you're from. You figure out different ways that we can increase, and that's why I was talking about recruiting. So I know we have an issue here with recruiting. So that will be part of trying to implement something for recruiting and get more people to come in or retaining more officers as well before people start leaving the city. And just being honest with your staff or the people that's coming under you or the people that's going to assist you to help you grow, because you can't do it by yourself. So the main thing will be trying to work with everyone, get everyone to buy in with you, assist you, and then you just tell them what your goals are, what your rules and regulations or policy that you think that you could implement, and get some feedback from them to find out what you can do to get the city on its way to being a better city.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
I'm interested in civilian oversight, and I'd like to know what you know about current trends with civilian oversight and how you would incorporate that in your administration.
I guess it's kind of like what I spoke about a little while ago, but yes, ma'am. We started this thing. It was myself and another patrol officer that worked for me, actually, and it was called Bridge the Gap. So what we did, we would go to the churches and things like that and have events at the church and invite people out. We would, the officers, we would try to get a lot of people together to contribute and get the money together for that. So I had no problem with civilian oversight being part of the solution, because if you don't do that, they're going to always feel as if the police department has something to hide. And it's kind of like the Citizens Academy. It's not the same thing, but you got to give them that opportunity to be able to say what they think should happen, or even we have officers that have disciplinary issues that come up. It's a lot easier. I think it's a lot better or more broad when you have someone on the outside versus everybody on the inside doing the same thing. So with civilian oversight, I think it's a perfect idea. I've tried it. It worked. And I just feel like it works great, because if you don't use the community to help you with it, most police, we all focus kind of like this. We got that blind, we don't see the left or the right. We just see this. But when the civilians on the outside looking in, there's things they're going to see that you're just not going to see. You're not going to notice it. So when you have civilians on the board with you, it's a whole bunch of things that you'll miss that you had never had no idea. That's a great idea that they could bring to the table. So I have no problem with it whatsoever. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Without discussing any details regarding the Brave Cave and related accusations, what steps you would take to ensure that this type of alleged activity would not occur again, given specific accountability things that you would do? And earlier you alluded to Memphis and the 48 hours.
Yes, sir.
That episode. So those type of incidents, what would you implement to attempt to prevent those?
Well, one I could speak on that's real familiar, which kind of like what you was talking about, was Tyreek Nichols. And, the 5 officers that just got arrested, actually 2 of them I knew personally. And we had that situation happen. So the chief did a good job when it came to opening up to the public and the videos became available like this. Because if you don't release these videos, it always appears that you're hiding something. So that's the one thing that stopped us from dealing with a riot, burning the city down. So when you deal with those incidents that the citizens see and think that the police are doing things to hide or cover for each other, you have to go out there and be blatantly honest with them, good or bad, and you just got to put it out there. So the quicker you can put it out there, I think the better off you are before you end up with a riot and you end up burning down your whole city. And a lot of times, sometime when things come up that the citizens don't see, you know, they only get a part of it, where it could go the other way around, when also was totally justified in doing something. But when you don't release that video, and once the fire start burning, it just escalate and escalate. So I just feel like you have to be open and honest, and unless the investigation is really one of those things, you just can't release it that soon. But if possible, you need to go out, definitely, the chief, and make a statement. Don't hide anything, and just release whatever you can release without messing with the integrity of the investigation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, this is under the category of community engagement, and you've already put a lot of emphasis on this. But
yes, sir.
It's a little different tack here. What are your proposals concerning networking with other sectors of the community, such as churches, nonprofits, advocacy groups, who work to address the causes of crime, poor education, job opportunities, addiction, etc.? And what has been your experience in this area?
Yes, sir. It's kind of like we were talking about with Bridge the Gap. When we went to the churches and connected, it was on a Saturday. We were doing it like every other Saturday, and we connected, because one of the biggest things, if we be honest about it, when you're dealing with the inner city where your crime is happening, but a lot of it is poverty, no jobs or anything like that. So you feel like you must go out to take things, break into things to get what you want or need, whereas the jobs are not there. And like for me now, I'm sure you probably know, I'm a operations manager at FedEx. So I retired from Memphis Police June last year, and I went back to school years ago, and I got my master's in operations management, and I'm an operations manager at FedEx. So even with the police department, they still called me out. We did an event last week at the church, and I just push jobs, because now I'm in a position that I can hire people. And I've only been there a year, but I've given out at least 50 jobs. So when the police go out there and you let them know that you're concerned and you want to help and you want to assist, then you can't just talk. You need to connect with all these other businesses and stuff like that. I know they say there's no jobs out there, but believe me, they're there. It's just a matter of, do you want it? If you don't want a job, not just go knock on the door. That's not how that works. But in my case, I guess it's a little different, because I didn't even realize I was blessed with that opportunity. And now I just pass out cards where we have a parade event, Christmas parade, or whatever the case may be. But we have to start showing the community that we are more concerned with their well-being than just taking people to jail. And that's, you have to punish the people that's doing things that's punishable. But at the same time, you must assist people that need assistance, because everybody's not cut from the same cloth. We're all not playing with the same deck of cards. So you're going to have to go out there and help people. And once the community see you trying to help, and I'm not just saying the chief of police himself, it could be the lieutenants, the majors, the patrolmen, but everybody has to do it in order to get the civilians to get where they need to be, to make the money they need to make. Because if we all make decent money, then that'll stop some of this crime. And then school events, a lot of cutbacks was done on that, and people don't realize that had a major problem. Because I'm sure, like in Tennessee and in Norfolk, and I'm sure you guys have the exact same issue.
Mr. Davis, that's your time on that question.
Okay, sorry about that.
Hi, Mr. Davis. My question comes from the category standards and strategies. Looking to the future of Baton Rouge Police Department, what do you believe is the department's greatest difficulty that it will encounter? What area do you believe shows promise or has the greatest potential at Baton Rouge Police Department?
One of the biggest problems from what I've checked into in the last year or so is trust. And the community in the police department has this big disconnect when it comes to trust. So without having any trust from the community. I think that's one of our biggest issues that we're going to have to overcome, because that's with any department, but especially here in Baton Rouge, because you have that inner city scope that just look at police to say they work a different way when they at a different area of the city, and the fair treatment is not there. So you're going to have to definitely show fair treatment. But what was the second part? I'm sorry.
What areas do you believe show promise or have the greatest potential?
I think the officers here want to be here. So I think that's one of the biggest things they show promise, that the officers now that you're bringing in, it's not like people that's just looking for jobs anymore. These are people who truly want to be the police. So I think to connect with them and get them to do a better job, I think that's one of the biggest areas that show promise, because these guys and girls that's coming in now, you definitely have to want to be the police other than just to come in for a check, because it's not for the money, because none of us ever got rich being the police. We pay bills, but it's not for the money. So I think that's the biggest area that shows promise, that people here that truly want to be here. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I don't have any further questions.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, just one more question for you. So you've discussed a lot about getting involved in the community and networking at your new job, correct, right? FedEx, not at the police department?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Want to make sure. But one of the questions we were given, this is from Category 9, Recruitment, Retention, and Personnel Support, relates to what would be your plan to address the increased rate of attrition amongst early retirement and mid-career departures? And they highlighted the fact that the department has a significant issue with losing experience and departures of 12 to 15-year officers. Sorry, that might have been. Okay. That's it. Do you want me to, you got it?
You're fine. Yes, sir. One of the biggest issues that a lot of departments have is like for raises, for instance. We always do everything we can to bring people in. And then once you get about to that 15-year mark, we don't do anything for the officers that's currently there to retain them. So most of your experienced officers, once they reach eligibility to retire, they run out the door, because we don't show them the same amount of love, I guess you want to say, that we show the people coming in. So like I said, I was a lieutenant over recruiting as well. And when you bring people in, that's one thing, but now you have to do something to retain them. And what we did in Memphis, I'm not saying Baton Rouge could do it. I don't know where the money even came from in Memphis, but all of a sudden, money just shot through the roof. But that, and you guys got the take-home car policy, so that helps a lot as well. So you just have to still have that ability to transfer from one job to another so that things don't grow old on you. I just don't think it's a good idea, especially when you got 15 years on the state. Like OCU for us was organized crime unit. And you stay at this unit for 3 years or 10 years, and now you just bored and burnt out. So I think it should be a cap on how long you be at certain locations before you move on to another location to continue your growth. As long as you continue growth, you always want to be there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I have no further questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I have no questions either.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, my last question would be, transitioning to Baton Rouge from another city, if you were selected as chief, what would be your legacy when you retire?
I always say leave it better than you got it.
All right.
And that's been my goal everywhere I went. And until this day, they still calling me back, asking me, will I come out of retirement and come back to MPD? Because the way I left it was not the same way I got it. And that's going to always be my legacy. When I leave FedEx, because I just got a promotion, I just go ahead and tell you, I just got a promotion to FedEx in a year and a half. And I'm the only manager at FedEx that came off the street. FedEx only hires from internal hiring. They don't hire external. And I'm the only one. And after I got promoted, I was supposed to move on the 16th. Now, of course, I'll come back to Baton Rouge because I have a home right there in 3450 White Sands Drive. So I got a home here anyway. But I just always say, wherever you go, you got to make it better for the next person. It ain't about you. You could never think it's about you. So you got to leave it better than you got it. And that's going to be my legacy wherever I go.
First, Mr. Davis, I want to apologize for my phone issues. That was rude, and I just apologize.
No, ma'am, you're fine.
My second question has to A second question has to do with 21st century policing, and I'm curious which pillar you think is the most important.
The biggest thing, like I say, honesty. It's different now because social media. That's one of our biggest helps. At the same time, that hurts us too, because we didn't have that back in the day. You know, it was just pretty much word of mouth of what you see on the news. But now with social media out there and phones everywhere, because everything could be recorded, taped, or whatever, it's kind of like policing the police and like the body cams. So that's part of that policing as well. So you must have the body cams, you must have them on, and this way you don't have anything to hide. So that's the biggest thing that I see as far as 21st century policing. That's the biggest change, I should say. And it helps because it can get you out of something that was said that you've done, but it could hurt you. But let's be clear on it. It doesn't hurt you, you hurt yourself. It's kind of like I used to tell my employees, if you get fired, I didn't fire you, you fired you. I just did the paperwork. I had to do the administrative side, but I didn't fire you, you did it. So that's kind of how I look at that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The chief of police is the CEO of a multi-million-dollar organization which oversees hundreds of staff and millions of taxpayer dollars and manage thousands of physical resources. What in your background makes you qualified to serve at this level? Please provide specifics.
Well, the job I work for now is $1 billion industry, and I'm responsible for, I have 80 employees directly with me, but the whole hub comes to me for like forklift classes and things like that. So financial, is funny you asked that. I was just doing payroll about 4 hours ago, spending some of the billions of dollars that FedEx makes. So I deal with money every day, and I have to maintain a budget, which math is my thing. When it comes to numbers, that's easy to me, and that's why a lot of people have me to do their paperwork when it's time to order parts and things like that, because we spending millions and millions of dollars a month, and I've done it, so I don't have any problem with it, and I just like numbers anyway, so it makes it easy to me, because anytime I can balance it out at the end, it makes me feel that much better that I was able to do it. But that's my experience from being with FedEx.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, this is from the recruitment, retention, and personnel support category. How do you aim to ensure that the police department's composition mirrors that of the Baton Rouge and its diverse community?
Baton Rouge, if I'm not mistaken, what is it, 53% black, I think it's like 35 white, then the rest Hispanic, or a lot of departments, we don't mirror that. So when we go out and do recruiting, we have to start off at the high schools. We need to implement a program. I'm not quite sure if you guys have one or not, to where you go out and recruit. It's called PACE. Is that the one with police assist community enforcement as well? Yes. So we would go out to the schools and we start a program where we get kids straight out of high school before they even go off to college. And we start a program where they only work like parades, special events and stuff like that. They don't have guns, but they just got the little white cars with the little yellow lights. So we go out and recruit like that, because that's how you get your inner city kids involved when you start doing things like that. And you also use your resources, like you have school resource officers, just to start passing out pamphlets, and that's where you get some diversity into the department, because they have to see us as something other than a robot and other than just a police. And that's been one of my biggest things that I enjoy when people meet me. I never tell them police, but years go by. I mean, time go by for real. They find out later on, like, I had no idea you was a police. And I'm like, what does that mean? You know, because they got that stigma, how we supposed to be. And I'm pretty sure you can tell just by the way I speak. I'm just not the average police. I've never been. I never will be. I don't want to be that everybody else. So I'm going to always be different. But I think that's just one of our biggest things.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Closing statement.
I'd just like to thank you guys for the opportunity that you was giving me. If I get the job, I promise you I'm the person you're looking for. If not, 3450 White Sands Drive, I'll still be available because I plan on moving back home because I'm vested at FedEx. And this is a passion for me. It's not something that I need to do because I get a retirement from Memphis Police Department. I get a Navy check because I retired from the Navy. I'm vested at FedEx, so I'm dumping my check. So money doesn't faze me at all, not at this part of life. Back when I was 20, yeah. 56, I didn't figure it out, finally. He helped me figure it out, but I finally figured it out. And I just want you to know that I am that person that you're looking for, and I will make that difference, guaranteed. And whenever I stay here or leave here, I will leave it better than I got it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Barton Guillory. We're going to take a 7-minute break so Ms. Carwell can figure out the controls on her phone, and then we'll come back.
It's not meaning to take this So my mom and my grandmother lived out. They're originally from Chicago. They were funny than my grandmother. So
the church,
Well-
mostly what you do?
No, I'm bivocational. I'm also an attorney.
Okay.
And,
Okay, I was wondering.
a member that died last week. Speaking of different kinds of denominations.
That's right, yeah, there's some differences.
He died last night. I'm leave here early. I talked to her a couple times. Get ready for Advent and close of the year, you know.
Yes, indeed. So you went from police work to law school, and you were always kind of involved in the
I
church?
was always going to church, but I actually started special ministry.
What is weed an option?
I finished law school practice. I practiced 2 years.
Is it on real bread? Okay, it's a wrap. It's a wrap.
Then I eventually went back to church because I had a small to medium church. I had to do both.
Alright, y'all ready?
And what kind of practice do you have?
I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We're going to continue with our interviews. Next up is Varden Guillory. Good afternoon, Mr. Guillory. My name is Lamont Cole. I am the chairman of the Police Chief Review Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. The way we're going to conduct this interview, you're going to have 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and then each committee member can ask up to 2 questions. We may not ask 2, but we can ask up to 2 questions from a list of categories that were pre-selected prior to interviews beginning. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each question, and then after 2 rounds of questions, you will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement.
Okay,
So let me know when you're ready to begin.
I'm ready.
It's on you.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Thank you for having me in your presence. It's a big deal for me to make it here this far. My name is Varden Guillory, V-A-R-D-E-N, Varden. I knew that I wanted to be a police officer since the age of 13 because of other family members and family friends. I started learning about police work at that age. Wasn't even old enough to be a police officer yet. It's been a passion for me. When I reached 18, from 18 to 20 years old, I did ride-alongs, and I learned from the different divisions of New Orleans Police Department with family and friends that worked out there. I wanted an introduction to police work. I also interviewed all of the retired officers in my city that I knew from when I was growing up, and current officers. I decided to join as a reserve officer and volunteer for sporting events. I did that for 1 year, and then went through the procedure and became a full-time officer. I retired on my 26th year at age 47. During my career, I served in patrol as a patrol officer, sergeant, detectives, K-9. I'm well-rounded. Lieutenant in patrol for several years, and then deputy chief of police at my agency. My hometown is Eunice, Louisiana. I was the first African-American deputy chief in the history of my city. I don't know about the background of the other candidates, but I've personally worked in many cities, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Alexandria, everywhere during my career. I personally worked undercover at a federal level. I was supervised by the FBI while working undercover in other cities. I've worked narcotics in several cities. I've handled multi-million-dollar budgets during my career, payroll, supervised the jail, was over fleet operations and up to 50 vehicles and motorcycles, and purchasing and purchase orders. I've handled everything, but my main thing while serving as deputy chief of police was administrative things like purchasing fleet vehicles, supervising everyone. I've also served as a detective. I see issues in the media where people are basically, I guess you could say, fuming about certain things that's happened with Baton Rouge Police Department.
That's your time on the
Okay.
show. Yes, sir. We'll start with the questions now.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Guillory. If you were chief of police in Baton Rouge, what community-based outreach would you install and carry out within the city?
I would like to get information and feedback from community groups, from churches, from the council members, see what's going on in their communities. I'd like to participate in functions, attend these functions, attend these meetings, get to know everybody. I have to, I think a chief has to get the information from the people that are involved, the community members. You can't sit in the office and dictate what goes on the streets unless you're a part of it. I'm the type of person where I like to pop up at accidents, pop up at calls, check on the officers, see what's going on, speak to the victims, see where I can help them to make it a better day for them.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Guillory.
Good evening.
So my question's going to be from Category 1, Personal Approach and Leadership. You talked about managing budgets in your opening, and on your resume, you discussed how you managed the $2 million budget for training, purchases, payroll, and fleet vehicles. And so one of the questions presented to us was that the position of chief of police is like being a CEO of a multi-million-dollar organization that oversees hundreds of staff and millions in taxpayer dollars. It also manages physical resources. What in your background makes you qualified to serve at this level? And could you give specific details specifically about how you might be ready or what you need to do to deal with that disparity? Because I think Baton Rouge's budget is about $103 million.
I'm ready. I've been reading. I've constantly educating myself since my retirement, update with laws and practices to help the public. There's also a culture change that's needed in police work. You can't continue to treat the public or go at the public with the old tactics of the old days. You've got new things that you can learn and institute with your people. But I'm fully capable regardless of the amount. I know it's public funds. I want to run the department efficiently within the budget that's provided by the governing authority, and keep track. I mean, I don't want to waste any of the public money. If more is needed in other areas and less needed in certain categories, I'm willing to work with the city council and rectify that. But regardless, I know that the department has to be operated within the budget given.
Great, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Guillory. What do you feel is the most important pillar of 21st century policing for our agency, and why?
My number one concern related to your question is the citizens of Baton Rouge need to learn how to trust their police department again. Because of certain events that have taken place previously, they have lost trust, and that trust is a main concern for me, building trust. You can't get information on your crimes if the people don't trust you. If they don't trust giving you information, you're running into roadblocks. You have to earn trust with the public and also the officials to make sure the job is done by the book. And we just need to reach out to these people.
Guillory, how you doing there? You say you come from Eunice?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, I know some good people from Eunice that know how to cook, like boudin and all that kind of. Will you bring some of that to Baton Rouge?
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out. All right. So, what is the biggest thing or experience that you've done that makes you the most qualified for this job?
Since the age of 13, when I started having an interest in police work, that makes 40 years. I've been interviewing people, taking notes, and to this day, I retired 7 years ago. I'm 54 years old now. To this day, every time there's a mass shooting, I review the case and read it. Anytime that there's crimes in certain areas, I read about it to gain the knowledge of how can this be prevented or what can be done differently to solve this in a faster manner. I never stopped. Even though I retired, I'm constantly updating myself. I follow the press conferences in Baton Rouge. I follow the crime reports in the media, but I don't actually take the media's information. I just brief myself, and then I start digging on my own, get my stats. I'm just always working. It's just a second nature for me to just look into certain events to try to see what can be done better.
Mr. Guillory, what does your first 100 days look like? Rank the top 5 priorities in your process for accomplishing them.
My first 100 days, I want to review the different sections of the department. I want to learn to meet all of the city leaders, introduce myself to them. The number one thing with the negative feedback from Baton Rouge right now, I'm going to tell you from my heart, you can't give anybody the ammo to come back towards you. If we review our policies, take a step back, have some meetings, just go ahead and tell the people what I'll tolerate, what I won't tolerate, things will go smooth. But my 5 things would be trust. That's number 1. That's in all of my notes. Trust, working on crimes, working with relationships with other departments and city officials, and working within the budget. Every department is short. We need to recruit some people, so that way we're not working the remaining people so hard. But I believe in putting manpower where it's needed.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Guillory. Okay. I'm with a group called Together Baton Rouge, and one of our important issues that we'd like to bring up is civilian oversight. So I'd like to know what you're familiar with about current practices with civilian oversight and how you might incorporate that in your administration.
I think the oversight type committee would be very useful. I could attend the meetings, get feedback from the committee, see what's needed, what people are what kind of information that the oversight committee is gaining, and share that information with me. That way I know where to work on certain things to basically get things working with the public. Like I said, my main thing is Baton Rouge needs to learn how to trust their police department. Again, it's not too far out of reach, but we just got to change the way we're operating. But the oversight committee would be very useful for me to gain information.
What would you describe as the most important quality for the position of police chief in Baton Rouge?
I think the most important quality is leadership. If you stand on policy and law and you don't stray from it, everything will work out fine. You have the chain of command, you have the different divisions, everything should work out. We just have to tighten up, go over policies. If I'm selected, go over policies in the first 30 days, see where we need to make changes and tweak things. But I want the officers to be highly trained. They need more training, and that's basically drawing the line. If you step away from your training, and you need to be held accountable, because we just need to work on things together. But it's I think I can make it work. I'm ready to be a leader, and we can make it work. It'll happen.
Mr. Guillory, you talked about seeing news incidents and the importance of building trust
Yes,
in the community. The flip side of that is officer morale, and those incidents have caused some flagging morale in the ranks. So could you address how you would handle that?
We need to build up the officers, let them know that they're appreciated. When an officer does a good thing, they need to be patted on the back. They need to know that they're appreciated and they did a fine job when they do so. I want them to strive for success. I want them to strive for safety. But most of all, we got to follow policy, and officers need to keep each other in line. Hey, you're losing your temper with this person, let me handle it. You go step over there to have a breather or whatever. We can work together and make things happen.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Guillory. Baton Rouge has many law enforcement agencies that work in the city. My question is about coordination amongst them. How do you propose to improve coordination and cooperation between BRPD and other local law enforcement agencies to reduce crime and promote safety? What can be done that is not already being done, and what has been in your experience in that area?
We need to share information, attend meetings together, train together. I've worked with multiple agencies on investigations and trained from Texas to Florida. I'm also a graduate of the Institute of Police Technology and Management from Jacksonville, Florida. I attended school over there. I've attended trainings in Texas. Once you work together, multiple agencies, and get to interact and maybe have meetings and get together, that way you may be able to provide something that my agency can't provide, and vice versa. But it can work. I've seen task force created where there's members of different agencies within the parish form a team and work on things together. But we need to just solve the crime. One agency may have information that the other one doesn't, and we could share that information, make it better.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to enter executive session.
There's a motion to go into executive session. Is there a second? Second, is that, but,
On the basis of?
on the basis of,
I don't know how much I should delve into this, considering the
generally
candidate
speaking, why are we going in executive session to discuss?
concerns about character.
You have the ability to go into executive session, as we discussed before, to deal with the character, competence, mental, or physical abilities of any candidate. So, but you have to give a basis. A motion has to be made, a second has to be made, and then the councilman, Cole, or committee chair Cole can determine if there's any objection, and there's no objection, you can go in. If there is an objection, then they need to vote, and it only goes in by majority.
So he just stated he wanted to discuss character of the candidate. And there's been a proper motion and second, no objections. So we're going into executive session.
Bring your food.
Okay. More space.
Cross the hall, ladies and gentlemen.
Peace. You don't hustle, man. I'd like to call the Police Chief Review Committee meeting back to order. We will continue where we stopped with Mr. Drake.
Wait,
It was your-
I'd like to move to exit executive session.
We're back in order. It's on you for
Oh, okay.
questions.
Good deal. Let me get my bearings again real quick.
All right. We'll go to Ms. Victoria and then come back to you.
Okay, thank you. I
Victoria.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I have no further questions.
All right, Ms. McConaughey.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Guillory, with you not being a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, if you were selected as the chief of police, what would your legacy look like when you finish your tenure as chief? What would you want your legacy to look like?
I'd like to be remembered as a fair person that operated by the book, by the rules, by the laws, but a fair person. I want the people to remember me. I'm talking about the PD for supporting them when they did their jobs by the book, and I want the people to know and remember me as being someone that built the trust between the citizens and the PD.
Thank you very much.
I have a question also about, since you are not coming out of Baton Rouge, are there any specific policies related to accountability or anything else that you experienced in your career that you think you would bring here? Or any procedures or policies that were unsuccessful that you would try to maybe eliminate from
To
our
my
policies?
knowledge, the civil service rules and regulations in place for civil service departments usually regulate things like that. If an officer does think that he's treated unfairly, he does have his appeals process before the local civil service board. And I've sat in some of those hearings while my coworkers or other people presented their cases. I've attended them. I've actually turned over some decisions. I've helped other officers with their paperwork. Basically, it's like a check and balance system, the way civil service operates when it comes to their discipline. And I think the regulations that are already in place could work out with everything.
No further questions?
Mr. Guillory, do you think the Baton Rouge Police Department needs to be reorganized?
I would like to review that. I don't have access to that information, but we may have to do that because we need to operate efficiently. I know that they're really short. I don't know how many people they're short right now. They're short staffed, but maybe a reorganization would help in some areas, like patrol that's really short. But some of these people are needed in the different divisions to work on these crimes.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Closing statements, Mr. Glenn.
I feel that I'm the man to lead the department into the next era, a new era for Baton Rouge. I want the citizens and the officials to be proud of my leadership in Baton Rouge Police Department. I feel that all of the self experiences that I've gone through have made me a person that has well-rounded information on all aspects, regardless of the division, but I think I can make it work. If I'm selected, I'm ready to start in 1 week if that happens that way. But I think I'm ready for it. I know I'm ready for it. We just need to make it happen. I'm willing to take it on, and we need to complete the investigations that are ongoing at this time and work towards brighter days for the Baton Rouge Police Department.
Thank you, sir. Sincerely appreciate you.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
At this time, we'll hear from our final candidate for the evening, Mr. Timothy Henderson. Good evening, Mr. Henderson. My name is Lamont Cole. I'm the chairman of the Police Chief Review Committee. The way we're going to conduct this interview, you're going to have 3 minutes for an opening statement. The committee members will ask a series of questions. We can ask up to 2. Each member may not ask 2 questions, but we can ask up to 2. You will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and then 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Let me know when you're ready to begin.
I'm ready.
On you.
First, I want to say that I'm both honored and humbled to be in y'all's presence today, having the opportunity to interview for this. And I commend y'all for putting together this committee and allowing us to have the opportunity to come in front of you. I want to kind of introduce myself as a person, and then I'll go through my law enforcement experience real quick. I'm Tim Henderson. I've been married to my wife, Lori, for 33 years. I have 3 sons, Tyler, Tim Jr., and Josh. I have 5 grandkids, little Tyler, Matt, Maddie, TJ, and then baby Charlie, who's our granddaughter in heaven. And that's who I'm as an individual. I'm a grandfather, a father, and I'm a husband. As a police officer, I became a police officer in 1990 for no particular reason. I just needed a job, honestly, and I started working at the parish prison. Then I became really intrigued with the concept of doing this police work. I went to LSU Police for 5.5 years, and then I went to the city police in Baton Rouge, where I retired as a lieutenant at just about a little bit less than 25 years. After that, I was in retirement for about a year, and then I took the job as chief of police in Killian. And currently, I'm retired again, and I own a private investigative business and a consulting firm.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I see on your resume you have experience in 21st century policing.
Yes,
And
sir.
Could you tell us which is the hardest one to implement that you've come across and why?
I think it's both hard and easy, so I'm going to tell you community policing, because we as officers have to understand the communities that we are policing. We have to understand the different challenges and needs of a particular community. And it could be a sub-segment of the city, and they may have different needs than maybe the outskirts of the city. So community policing, in my opinion, is probably one of the most challenging, because we have to get the people in the community to open up to us, but we also have to open up to them and let them see that we're human, have open dialogue with them, and that we're capable of, coming to a mutual agreement. That way we can find out what we need as far as solving crime and stuff like that. Because the community, I always say, we have few eyes, you have many. If the community's not involved, you're not going to have a functioning police department. You have to have community involvement in all aspects. So that would be my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Anderson. So this is from category 11, possible questions for current BRPD candidates, which that seems to be the most recent one. But so given your experience in the various divisions here on your resume, Uniform Patrol, Intelligence, Gun Crime Intelligence Center, Violent Crime Unit, Burglary, all these different areas, how did you or your division respond to the various difficulties and scandals that arose in BRPD during that time? I know street crimes was after, but narcotics was during that time. And did you implement, amend, propose any policies to try to make sure your unit functioned effectively?
Well, our unit was both committed to the task at hand, and we always had someone above us that we answered to. So we were pretty clear as to what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we were doing it. So we didn't really have to implement any additional safeguards. In my opinion, we policed on our character, and we policed to meet the needs and challenges of the community. But we had division commanders above us that had oversight. So I didn't see a real need for us to really implement anything, because we weren't in the situations that you're referring to.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Good evening.
How will you devise community outreach strategies that align with Baton Rouge's unique community fabric? And for the record, my question is coming from the community engagement category.
Could you please read the first portion of that again?
Absolutely. How will you devise community outreach strategies that align with Baton Rouge's unique community fabric?
All right. So, in the outreach concept, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have to understand the culture of the areas that we're patrolling, and we need to devise plans that fit the specific needs of this area or this area compared to just an overall view of the whole city, because the whole city doesn't experience the same amount of violence, the same amount of, disproportionate financial situations. Some people are more impoverished. There are more impoverished area than others. And, those are some of the areas that maybe we need to spend a little more time. We need to make sure that the youth of today don't live by the concept that violence is respected. We need you to respect education. We need to, change the mindset of our youth right now. And I would focus a lot of attention on that, but you'd have to have a panel, you'd have to have community leaders tell us what is needed in order for us to come up with a good strategy. So it's going to take a little bit of work, forming committees and just talking to people and see what's working. And if it's not working, then move on. If it's not working, we're going to go to the next strategy. Not everything works, unfortunately. You're welcome.
Mr. Henderson, good afternoon. How you doing?
Good, sir.
What is the biggest thing or experience that you've done previously that makes you the most qualified for this particular job?
I think the biggest thing is I care more than anything, and I probably have cared too much over the years. When I left BRPD, when I retired, I had a little over 3,000 hours of leave built up because I didn't take off a lot. I felt an obligation to the city, to my squad, and to the other people in the community. So I think my compassion for the community, my understanding of the community, not in a community policing concept, but policing your communities, you need to understand and be able to engage with people of different races, sexes, creeds. So I think that would be my answer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. What does your first 100 days look like? Rank the top 5 priorities in your process for accomplishing them.
So my first 100 days, we're going to look at efficiency and effectiveness of the department right now. And when I was chief in Killian, that's the first thing that I looked at. We need to know what resources we have. We need to know how efficient and effective everything is that we're doing. Next, I'm going to address the violence. The city of Baton Rouge has had a decrease in violence, and it's noticeable. And me as a former intelligence operative, I understand the dynamics of what's going on. So I can see the trends coming down. And so something's working right now that hadn't worked in the last 2 or 3 years. I would increase training in many different aspects, including pursuits, including de-escalation, things like that. And one of the most important things is, you have to hit the ground running if the chief, and I already have experience in the department, so I don't have to be told what to do. I just kind of have to be briefed on certain things. So within that first 100 days, the most immediate thing I'm going to do is develop a strategy to get us through October, November, December. Well, we're in November now, November, December, January, which typically are some of the most violent times as far as homicides, domestic abuse, and armed robbery type stuff. So we have to devise a plan immediately to make sure that we are addressing those situations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Good evening.
I'm a member of Together Baton Rouge, and one of the issues that's important to us is developing civilian oversight. So I'd like to know what you understand about civilian oversight and how you might include that in your administration.
Well, I like to sit up here and tell you that I know a lot about it, but I don't. But the things that I believe as far as civilian oversight is that as long as it's not dictating policy and it's just oversight, I have no problem with it. The cloak and dagger days are over. The police department needs to be open. People use the word transparent. It's overutilized and it's overused and underutilized. The word transparency doesn't mean a lot to people anymore. So we want you or a committee like this to come in and help us when we do our policy review, because we'll review every policy when I become chief. And we'll show you as a civilian what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I believe that there has to be a place for that oversight. It just can't be in a situation where y'all are doling out discipline and stuff like that. I feel like you should be able to review the disciplinary process, but if you don't understand civil service, if you don't understand the police officer Bill of Rights, then it's kind of hard to include you in something like that. But we want you to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's a guarantee I'll give you as chief of police. My door will never be closed to anybody in the community that wants to know what's going on. You're welcome.
What would you describe as the most important quality in the police chief in Baton Rouge?
I think the word consistency, but I'll have to say fairness also. You have to be consistent as a chief. You have to have the men and women of the police department respect you. And whenever you're doling out discipline, for instance, you have to make sure that you're doing it fair and impartial and that one person's not being treated different than the other. You have to let the community understand that you, as the chief of police, understand what's going on, and you have to be fair to them. You have to open your heart and acknowledge that there are issues that the police department and the community are dealing with and some negative things in the news right now. So I think that would be my answer, the fairness part.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Good evening.
What is your background? This is from Leadership, Culture, and Accountability. What is your background and experience in working with the police unions? I understand there's at least two, maybe three.
Well,
do you see avenues for improving relations while continuing to hold officers accountable?
Okay, so there's three different police unions. There's the Fraternal Order of Police, there's Magnolia, and then there's the Local 237. The Local 237 is the bargaining agent. The other two have they do not have the ability to bargain on behalf of the police officers. And the body of the police department voted on this some years ago, probably 15 or more. The FOP tried to come in to be the bargaining agent. So they're really the only ones, the Local 237 is really the only ones who can sit at the bargaining table, if you will. But we have to be open to the Magnolia and the Fraternal Order of Police, because they have a segment of the people within the department that might necessarily want to be in the Local 237, but they want the safeguards of a union. So I've never had a problem working with the union. Labor needs to understand their role. They need to ensure that they're looking out for the well-being of their officers, that they're treated fairly, and that when it comes to monetary issues and stuff, that they're bargaining, but they should never be involved in the day-to-day operation of a police department. And I think sometimes unions kind of misinterpret their role. So I was a union member for almost 25 years. The day I left, they still owe me a watch. So if they're listening, Brandon O'Neill, if you're listening, I still need a watch. So there'll be no problems with the union. I've always had a good relationship with them. I've stood the picket line with them when we were trying to get money in 2000. It was an informational picket because police can't, do anything more than informational picket. But, the union's necessary and there'll be no problems there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My question comes from standards and strategies. Please discuss with us any new ideas you have for violence reduction in our community.
Violence reduction in the community starts with intelligence. You have to have a department that's willing to look at the intelligence, whether it be human intelligence or wherever you get the intelligence from, license plate readers, from cameras. You have to be able to implement those strategies and use what you learn in the intelligence to map out a direction for your department. So my whole, if I am selected as chief of police, most everything is going to be based on intelligence data. So that would be the thing that I would say. We need human intelligence, and we need every other kind of intelligence. We need social media. We make a lot of cases on social media, believe it or not. So that would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
So I've just got one more question for you, Mr. Henderson. So you talked, I believe it was in response to Mr. Cole's question about improving training on things like pursuits this is from Category 8, Data Technology and Transparency. But that question about pursuits, I know that there's some new technology there. There's also new technology in surveillance. And given that you are a licensed private investigator now, I assume that you encounter these technologies a lot. So are there any nascent practices or technologies that you think BRPD could embrace to achieve its mission of protecting and serving? And how would you balance the needs of law enforcement with maybe the privacy interests of citizens?
But not about pursuits.
Any of the above.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, so one thing I wanted to do when I was chief in Killian, and we didn't have the resources, and I don't know if Baton Rouge has it, but we'll look for grant money. There is a system set up. It's a drone system that you can put an address in, you can type it in, and you can deploy the drone. So my father was killed in a police pursuit in Baton Rouge in 1989, just a few months before me becoming a police officer. So I know the tragedy involved in police pursuits. You have to have police pursuits, but it has to be for something egregious. Years ago, we chased everybody, and those days, they should be in the past. We should chase them only if whatever they have done leads us to believe that they have to be captured as a safeguard to the citizens. We don't want them running loose. So that would be one thing I would look at, that drone, because the drone can follow them, obviously, and it can give us updated pictures and stuff. I don't know all the technology involved in it, but the cameras, I want a camera everywhere. There's big police departments in London, they got cameras everywhere. We're not trying to infringe on anybody's right, but every time you step out into a public environment, I'm looking around, there's probably 10 or 15 cameras pointed toward me. It's just a fact of life, the cameras are out there. So we're not trying to invade any privacy. If you have cameras at your house and you want to give us access to them, by all means, only give us access to the data that shows a crime or something else. We don't care if your dog was barking and having a good time. We just care about the crime. So we're not going to infringe on anybody's rights. We're going to make sure that everybody that gives us this information gives it to us freely. But the city needs to invest in more cameras everywhere.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Henderson, what is your plan, or what are your plans for addressing the off-duty employment policy to ensure the city's security needs are prioritized?
Well, extra duty and overtime is a privilege. It's not guaranteed. Your job is to patrol the city or whatever your division is to affect a change in crime. You try to influence crime. When Chief Murphy Paul, when I was in the intelligence division, he once spoke of us as being violence interrupters. And that's what we need to do. So our primary objective is to be a police officer and work within the confines of your scope of duty. That should never interfere with, extra duty should never interfere with it. Now, extra duty is something that I raised my kids on. I've been married 33 years to my wife, right? I was able to give my kids more than I would have been able to give them, because Baton Rouge wasn't paying a lot when I came. We didn't come for the money when I came. We came for the benefits. We came for the job itself. So right now, I believe you can work 16 hours. So 10 of that's going to be during the course of your regular duty, and then another 6 I don't really think that it's really a big factor. I don't see an issue there, honestly. You know, if you are doing your job and then you work extra duty, I don't really see that there's a really big issue. Not that I've seen or heard about. So I really probably wouldn't try to manage that right now. You know, as long as officers are doing their job, what they do secondarily, you know, to enhance their ability to provide for their family, you know, we don't want to stop them from doing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Henderson, we know that policing is a difficult job and comes with mental health challenges. Right. So can you talk a little bit about officer wellness, well-being, how you might address mental health challenges that officers face, you know, during their job?
Well, the first thing I would do if I was chief of police is I would make these districts a little more friendly to the officers. I would have and they're really antiquated, all the areas that some of these buildings they was here way before me. So I would try to make an area where they can have roll call, where they can get their assignments, but also just a common area for them to be able to relax a little bit and debrief, because uniform patrol officers specifically, they encounter everything. Everything's an unknown variable to them. Every time they go to a call, something unique is going to happen. And if they're put under stressors that maybe they're not ready to deal with, or they see that they can't deal with it, then we need to make sure we debrief. If we have a major incident, we need to make sure we debrief. When I first became a cop, you know, you sucked it up. You didn't really talk about things, and I'm sure some of the older people here kind of grew up the same way I did. Those days are gone. If you have emotions, you have to let them out, because if you don't deal with them now, you'll deal with them in 20 years, right? So at the end of your retirement, all this will kind of manifest itself. Certain things bother people more. One of my first calls that I went on when I was in Scotlandville, there was a deceased baby who was on the table. And for the life of me, when I walked in there, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, I was like, you know, kind of taken aback that the baby wasn't in a blanket or anything, and you know, stuff like that. And that's probably 27, 28 years ago. Stuff like that stays with you. So you need to talk about it. I have a good wife, and my wife has been a good sounding board, and she lets me, you know, tell her about stuff. But you also have to have friends. You have to have counselors. You know, BRPD have chaplains. They have peer support. We need to make it clear that it's not a macho thing anymore. That them days are gone, right? I tell my kids, all of them were cops. God gave us emotions for a reason, right? He gave us emotion for a reason. Sometimes you just have to cry. Sometimes you have to laugh. Sometimes you know, whatever the occasion would be. So I would say, and I've told people this that worked under my command, I fancy myself a tough guy, but I promise you, this is bothering me right now. So let's talk about it, all right? I ain't embarrassed. We got to take the embarrassment the embarrassment component out of it. You're welcome.
No further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Henderson, are there any other changes you would make if you were chief, specifically?
Well, for morale, I was a street cop most of my career. I worked in intelligence division, crime gun intelligence, but I always consider myself a street cop, even though I was in these other divisions, because I based my success on the community. And when I say street cop, I just mean a uniform patrol officer, right? But I was comfortable in the community, and I want the uniform patrol officers to not only be comfortable, but one thing I'll address is this. They're always treated, not intentionally, but they treated like lower class citizens within the police department. They don't have all the advantages that a lot of the detective divisions have. So one thing I'll do is prioritize them. I want to make sure they got good cars. I want to make sure they got good equipment, make sure they got good training. I want to make sure that their funds allocated for them to go to train in Jacksonville, Florida at a conference that they need, because they're really the first people that see everything. The detectives know what they're doing because they're a homicide detective, they're burglary detective, armed robbery detective. So I think one of my strategies would would be to get those guys and girls happy, get them trained, make sure they're well equipped, and teach them how to talk to people, and teach them the community loves you. I don't care what anybody says. I was on these streets in every city, in every neighborhood in Baton Rouge. The community overall loves the police department, and the police department needs to love them back, and which they do. But we need to have open communication lines, and so that would be my priority, is to get the people of uniform patrol happy, because they're the face of the division. They're the face of the department. They're the ones that you see. You see the squad cars cruising around. They go to calls when they're at your house or my house, whatever. You know, they're the face of the department. So that's one thing that I would focus on, in getting them all those things that I referred to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question relates again to your longstanding history working with BRPD. Throughout your career as an officer at BRPD, were there any policies or procedures that were modified or eliminated that should be re-implemented or reconsidered?
I don't recall. Well, there was a pursuit. Not a pursuit policy. I'm sorry. There was a rec policy that was really awful for years. And I think they changed that maybe in around 2005, 6, 7, or somewhere in that area. But I think Baton Rouge overall kind of reviews and keeps up with their policies, and they try to keep things with current trends. But like I mentioned earlier, you know, I would go in and revisit every policy to make sure. And especially the pursuit policy. I know that's not part of your question, but the pursuit policy is so long, it's really hard to follow that policy and actually have a pursuit. We have to train our officers and make sure that they understand you have to stop here, you have to stop here. You have obligations when driving. So the pursuit policy is a big thing for me, obviously, because I mentioned to you that my father was killed. He was a civilian. He wasn't a cop, he was a civilian. And the bad guy hit his car and killed him and his friend. So we need to revisit things like that. But there's not really anything that I can say that changed. I mean, there was a couple laws that were changed, like domestic violence gave us the opportunity to arrest people even if the victim didn't want to. So they kind of helped guide us with that. But as far as policies, I can't really think of any. You're welcome.
Closing statements.
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to come here, and as a committee, you have a huge obligation in front of you to narrow down the list of candidates to the top 5, and I hope that you use your heart and your intellect to make good decisions, and I do appreciate the fact that y'all gave us all the opportunity to interview. To the men and women of the Baton Rouge Police Department, I don't really want to talk about myself, I want to talk about them. You have the opportunity to have an administration change. You're going to have to open your hearts and minds and let the next chief, whoever it be, whether it be me or somebody else, let them come in and let them pave their own path and make sure that you give them every opportunity to be successful. To the community, I'll say this. If I'm elected chief of police, I've been through all the communities. I would tell my guys and girls to go out there and you know, make friends in the community. Like I said, we have few eyes, you have many. So it's important that our officers utilize their skills and resources to help the community. And let's try to, you know, bring Baton Rouge. It's not complicated. Open lines of communication. Me and you have differences. Me and you have differences. We can talk. And look, we may never agree, but guess what? We can walk away friends and shake hands or pat each other or hug each other. So, you know, I challenge y'all, I challenge the men and women of Baton Rouge City Police, and I challenge the community to all let's bring everything together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen who are at home, we have now entered the public comment portion of our meeting. Is there anyone here seeking to make a comment on the meeting this evening? Please come down, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Dothier. I live in Zachary, Louisiana. I had some prepared statements that I wanted to make tonight, but sitting here listening I think I'm going to reserve those for a more appropriate forum, but I will say this. In listening to the questions that you've posed to the candidates and in their answers, there seems to be a recurring theme. And if I had to narrow it down to two, I would say honesty and integrity. And I believe that that's important. And I believe you do too. I do have some documents that I would like to pass out to the committee, and it goes straight to the heart of honesty and integrity. And I believe I'd like to pass those out to you now and let that be the end of my public comment.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to make any comments on the meeting this evening? Anyone else wishing to make any comments? That closes the public comment section of the meeting. We'll be back tomorrow with 5 more candidates to interview: C. Ivy, C. Joaquin, C. Kirsch, B. Strong, and D. Wallace. The meeting will begin tomorrow at 4:00 p.m., same bat time, same bat location. Action items? Yeah, we need to delete that item. Is there a motion moved by Mr. McClanahan, seconded by Ms. Victorian to delete item 4, action items. We'll be back tomorrow, same time. You got to vote? Ain't nobody object. So move and seconded. Any objection? No. Motion carried. Thank you, sir. Only been doing this 8 years, but thank you, sir. Nothing just messing with you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and second. Any objections to the motion to adjourn, Mr. McClanahan? Motion carried. See you all tomorrow, 4:00 p.m.